Akwaba, Midasi. Welcome, greetings, hello, happy Sunday. Hope everybody is reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual health today on this Sunday. We are so glad that you are here with us. We are experiencing some strange problems with our laptop, so we have a plan B if something happens. This is a new laptop, so it just goes to show you that this belief that a lot of people have that capitalism is the only economic science that has created technology, and so therefore the inference is that what capitalism is creating is better, is an absurd concept, because as much as these things cost, there shouldn't be any issues like this just a couple of months after having it, but yet there it is. So we move forward. We're glad you're here with us for this very important topic, Afghanistan from a revolutionary Pan-Africanist perspective. And that's important to say it from a revolutionary Pan-Africanist perspective, because that's who we are. And so we reserve the right to view the world from our political perspective. Clearly, no one else is doing that. No one else is speaking about the world from our perspective. So that's our responsibility, and we humbly and proudly take that on. And I had to explain that to a number of people this week. People contacting me, I'm offended because you had a picture of women, naked women on there, women dressed in skirts, and these people are calling them naked because of their religious views. And I told them, well, the problem here is you've just reached out to the wrong people, because we don't tell women how to dress from our perspective. That's your problem. So you should organize an event, and you can do the event whatever way you want to do it. But we're going to do it the way we want to do it. And as long as we don't present anything that's not true, and we'll tell you right now, what we're going to talk about today, you will not and cannot refute it, because it's absolutely 100% based in factual analysis of the conditions in Afghanistan, easily documented and verifiable. So that's all we care about, and it should be all you care about and everyone else. So we're glad you're here. We give thanks to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere always. This is their land. It has always been their land. It always will be their land. And it's irrelevant whether people know that or not, whether they acknowledge it or not is completely irrelevant. Justice is justice. It's universal in its application. So we know that this is indigenous people's land, and we do everything we can to support their battle to get their land back, because that's what they're fighting for, is their land back. They're not fighting for more casinos. They're not fighting for stores on the side of the road. They're fighting for this land back, which rightfully belongs to them. And just like anything that belonged to you that was stolen, you would want it back. They want their land back, and they're not interested in hearing any of the excuses as to why it no longer should be considered their land and who's here and what they have done here. That's all irrelevant. It is still their land, and it will always be their land. 500,000 years from now, it'll still be their land. So we stand with them in their fight for self-determination. And of course, we honor our African ancestors, who are the only reason why we are here, the absolute only reason why we are here today, because of the consistent resistance they have put up for 530 years for our dignity. So we thank them and we honor them always. And we are happy that you are here today with us to participate in this very important discussion. So with that, we will go ahead and get started with our typical introductions. My name is Ajamu. I am a longtime organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which is the organization that sponsors our Ancestors' Voices, which is the name of this program. I've done work for the party all over the world and will continue to do so for as long as I'm able. And with me, as always, every week for our 80+ consecutive week here is my daughter, Shakura, who grew up in the All African People's Revolutionary Party's Young Pioneer Institute and is now herself an organizer in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. A dad's dream come true, but it was 100% her decision. She can tell you I never once told her, yeah, this is what you need to do. I just told her she needed to be in some organization working for justice. And she made that decision. So I'm very happy about that, obviously, and very proud of her. She's about to become the first doctor in our family. So that's very exciting for me. It might be just as exciting for me as it is for her, not because of the title, because we don't do bourgeois titles in our family, but just because I know that my parents and my parents' parents would be so proud of her if they were all still here to witness this. And I just think the fact that she's the first one doing this is just phenomenal, because I know the struggles that they engaged in to contribute to my life so that I could be in a position to engage and struggle to contribute to her life. And so that's why it's so important. So thankful to share this earth and this space with her. And then getting back to the AAPRP briefly, our objective, you all, what we're fighting for is Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa. That is our objective, one unified socialist Africa. It is of absolutely no concern to us if you don't believe that that can happen. We know that it's going to happen, and we will be here to remind you when it does happen. Reason why we know is because we spend all our time working to achieve it based on the strategy laid out in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare that you see on the right of your screen there. Of course, Nkrumah was the founder of the AAPRP in 1968 when he released this book and called for the creation of the AAPRP. And the strategy to achieve Pan-Africanism he lays out in the book is the unification of all of the Pan-African forces on the ground throughout Africa who are fighting for that same objective, one unified socialist Africa. And so there on the screen, you see logos of some of the many, some are there, many are not there, organizations that we work with on a regular basis to bring about this objective. So when people ask us, well, how many people are in the AAPRP? And then we say millions, we're not lying to you. If you understand the concept of the All African People's Revolutionary Party that Nkrumah talks about in the book, and you understand our work with all of our sister parties, then it would make sense to you. So that's what we're doing. And we have chapters all over the world and relationships with other liberation movements who are fighting for justice against this backward system. So we're thankful for you joining us. Afghanistan from a revolutionary Pan-Africanist perspective. And to get us started, as always, I turn it over to my wonderful daughter, comrade, and partner in these weekly broadcasts, Shakura, to get us going.
Oh, thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. Greetings. We hope that you are safe and well. I especially want to emphasize that last part about being safe and well, because in order to learn about what's truly happening, because we know that the lies are being fed, we have to be mentally able to, dissect the information, to process the information that's being presented to us, and to be critical and to be analytical about it. So I truly hope that you all are safe and well. And I thank you so much for joining us today. This is really important because my dad just talked about how there are millions of people who are involved with this particular party in terms of organizing internationally. And so it begs the question, have we stopped to think about how many people are sacrificing and putting their lives on the lines for us? And they've never met us. And in some spaces we might interact and meet with them, but there are people in the PAIGC right now who are fighting because they understand that oppression is not just something that they are experiencing in their city and in their country, but it's being happened all over the world. It's happening in Canada. It's happening in Sacramento. It's happening in other parts of the European as well as Asian places. So, we have to think about, there are people literally sacrificing for us. And some of them belong to the party. Some of them belong to the PAIGC. Some of them belong to different organizations that we are family related. So the Irish Socialist organization and different organizations in Venezuela and different organizations in Cuba. So just trying to give you a different frame to think about like they have no problem waking up every day and sacrificing for you and I because they consider themselves revolutionary. And they also understand that the work won't get done unless they continue to sacrifice. So, how does that relate to our topic today? Well, it relates to our topic today because we all have a responsibility to make sure that the truth is exposed. And we all have a responsibility to make sure that people are not spreading lies when we know that we have truth that we can share. And in some spaces, that might mean increasing our political education. In some spaces, it might mean encouraging our organizations to consider adopting a political education model. But we need to make sure that the truth is being exposed because we haven't gotten anywhere with all the lies. So obviously that means we need to reevaluate, reassess, and try to figure out some other strategies. In order to properly understand the history of Afghanistan over the last 50 years, it's necessary to have a clear understanding of the politics of the Cold War era. Before that, we want to state clearly that Afghanistan is a country full of proud people with a glorious history, just as every country on earth. The country is a landlocked territory in what is commonly called South Asia. The people have a wonderful culture and history, including the prominence of several ethnic groupings and languages, of which many of the people speak Pashto, and Persian is also widely spoken. The purpose of this session is not to provide an in-depth history of Afghanistan, but you should take time to find out as much as you can about every corner of the world. That way, you can avoid the propaganda trap of viewing Afghanistan and anywhere else as just a war zone country where the people have no agency and humanity, which is exactly what imperialism wants us to believe. From the October 1917 victory of the Bolshevik Party in Russia and the subsequent emergence of the Union of Socialist Soviet Republics, or the USSR, or the Soviet Union, until the early 1990s, the world was dominated by the politics of the so-called, quote, Cold War, end quote, over the ideological fight between the so-called, quote, socialist bloc, end quote, countries led by the Soviet Union and the capitalist empire countries led by the US. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, also known as, was formed as the military apparatus to protect capitalist countries, and the Warsaw Pact was formed as a military union to protect the so-called socialist bloc countries. We say so-called because as revolutionary Pan-Africanists, we do not see the former Soviet Union as the leader of the socialist world. We don't today, and we never have. Our revolutionary struggle has never been a part of the Soviet Union's sphere of influence, and the ideology that guides our actions is Incrumis Terreus, after our revolutionary Pan-African ideologue, Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré, not the Marxist-Leninist ideology that guided the former Soviet bloc countries. We respect Marxist-Leninism as a revolutionary ideology, but it's important for us as revolutionary Pan-Africanists to make this distinction because many people, especially within the capitalist US center of misinformation, don't have the tools to make the proper differentiation. I would also argue that we need to be able to understand that following Incrumis Terreism is one way that we can continue to be proud of understanding that we have ancestors who have paved the way for us, and those ancestors look like us. Because a lot of times people will not really be clear about the fact that you do have colleagues and comrades and ancestors like Sekou Touré, or colleagues and comrades and ancestors like Kwame Nkrumah who have paved the way for you. So instead, you think you need to follow Marx or you think you need to follow Lenin, but you actually have people who have paved the way for you and they look like you and they study Pan-Africanism to help you understand more about yourself than Marx or Lenin would ever be able to do. And I guarantee you, and I challenge you, if you don't think I'm right about that, then read Kwame Nkrumah, one of his many books, or read one of Sekou Touré's many books, and then come back to me and have a conversation. Because I guarantee you, after reading those books, It's going to empower you in a different way. If you are in fact African, it's going to empower you in a different way to make you want to actually get up and do something, because these comrades were writing about revolution before I was even born. And I still see the value in what they were saying, sadly, because we are still not free and our land is still not our land. So we still have work to do so that Kwame Nkrumah can truly rest. As of right now, the teachings that he has given us, we need to follow them to the T, because we're still not where we need to be. But I would argue we respect Marxism-Leninism. We do. But we also understand that we have our own path and we have our own leaders who have already paved the way for us. Why? Because they understood the oppression that they experienced when they were born on the continent, and also when they came to the States and other parts of the world, to understand that Africans everywhere are oppressed, along with other people of color. So this struggle reached every corner of the world. And with Afghanistan, it was no immunity to it. A semi-feudal, technological, underdeveloped country, Afghanistan during the 70s moved to the left, with strides towards creating a socialist revolution of their own. Next slide, please. In April of 1978, the Socialist People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan staged a military coup that installed unprecedented reforms that permitted women to enter college and decide whether to get married and or divorced or not. It's incredibly important to state clearly that this SAR revolution in April 1978 happened before the Soviet Union came into Afghanistan to support the government of the People's Democratic Party. This is so important because capitalism will have you believe that the socialist government in Afghanistan only resulted because of the Soviet Union, i.e. the Soviets imposed socialism on the Afghani people, when the truth is it was the people of Afghanistan themselves who decided to implement socialism in their country. So the people decided. That's where the power comes from, you all. Unfortunately, a power struggle within the People's Party weakened the leadership in 1978, and the leading cadre in the People's Party accepted an offer from the Soviet Union to offer military and logistical support to their government in December of 1979. But again, it must be clearly stated that this was more than a year and a half after the socialist system was introduced to Afghanistan. You all continue to be revolutionaries, join an organization working for justice, and speak the truth. Speak the truth. We are all responsible for promoting truth and justice. Asante Sana.
And thank you so very much, Shakur, for that foundation. And I just want to underscore a couple of things that you said that are very important, and I don't want people to miss them. First, that again, we are African revolutionaries. So don't leave here lying, saying that, well, they were saying that the Afghan revolution in 1978, that was the right road to go. Look, our point in giving you this history is that the Afghani people have the right to determine their destiny. Nobody else, not US imperialism, no one else. The Afghani people have a right to determine what direction they want to go in the future. What we are saying is that it's important that people have to understand that at that particular point in time in history in 1978, enough people there decided that they wanted to engage in a socialist path. And that decision had nothing to do with the Soviet Union at the time. Although if you listen to the way history is recounted here, it was only happened because of the Soviet Union. So we just have to make sure people understand that history. And then from there, we go into, US political and economic interests in Afghanistan and what happened, as a result of that decision in the SAR revolutionary process, where they decided to invite the Soviet Union in to support their regime in 1979. So one thing that has to be pointed out that's not really ever talked about clearly is the identification of quality oil reserves in the former Soviet territories above Afghanistan. If you look at a map and you look, you find the country of Afghanistan. I know everybody, everybody in the US is an expert on everything. And if you had $100 bill to give them to point to Afghanistan on the map within 5 seconds, 99% of people couldn't do it. But yet everybody's an expert on everything. But if you look at a map, if you have one, if you don't have one, you should have one. I have several. They hang up in my house. Shakur can tell you, she's right here. She grew up with maps in the house her whole life. Maps of the world, maps of Africa, always. If nothing else, I was going to make sure she understood geography and knew how to determine what place in the world actually existed. And little things that we don't think about, like the Rand McNally maps are, they're designed to promote US imperialism. So that's why they have the US in the center of the maps. And that sends a subliminal message to you that the US is the center of the world. When in reality, there's no center of the world. Every part of the world is the center. And the US is made much larger on those maps than it actually is. In fact, you can fit almost 4 United States inside of Africa. But, these are just side notes about how we don't understand geography. So if you look at a map, you'll see that the countries above Afghanistan in the former Soviet Union controlled territories, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, those countries, oil analysts in the 70s discovered quality oil reserves. And what that means, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, is that these folks were talking about, if you review oil reports from that era, 1977 through 79, what they identified is that the oil was so well, had such quality to it that it wouldn't require much refining. And if you understand anything about the oil industry, that's what they're always looking for, is oil that can come out of the ground and go into the gas pumps and everywhere else that needs to go for them to profit off of it, with as little refining done as possible, because that's where their expenses come in. So they were very interested in this territory, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and exploiting those oil reserves. The problem is that with the Soviet Union there, they of course were not going to be able to have access to that part of the world. And so the Carter administration, because a lot of times this is blamed on the Reagan administration, and Ronald Reagan was absolute garbage, like every US president. They're all garbage. Obama, Trump, the one in there, the clown in there now, they're all nothing but clowns, criminals, and garbage. But Jimmy Carter, for some reason, liberals always want to give him some kind of pass because he builds houses. He's 125 years old and he's still helping to build houses for humanity, or whatever the hell he's supposed to be doing. But that's the part they put out there, the propaganda part they want you to see. What they don't tell you about is during his administration, they decided that they wanted to create, in their own words, if you review the Central Intelligence Agency documents from that era, a Vietnam War for the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. And their objective was to create a war in Afghanistan that would force the Soviet Union to use all of its resources to the point where it would weaken the Soviet Union, in the hopes of forcing the Soviet Union to dismantle. And in doing that, it would create the conditions where they could have access to those oil reserves in the former Soviet territories of Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. And that's what they wanted to do. And they wanted to build this Caspian oil pipeline, which was developed by Union Oil, to be the passageway for these oil reserves that were located in these territories. But again, remember, they couldn't do that as long as there was a Soviet Union. Now, of course, if you know the history, they were correct. The Soviet Union ended up giving so many of its resources to back this war in Afghanistan against these forces that were fighting to overthrow the socialist government in Afghanistan, that it did severely weaken the Soviet Union. And all of these efforts were facilitated in large part by the CIA, which worked with these Taliban leaders there then, Omar Mullah, Imam Omar Mullah, was the leader of the Taliban, as well as all of the so-called Mujahideen forces who were, fighting to overthrow the socialist government in Afghanistan. They didn't like the reforms that created, or as somebody told me this week, the picture that we showed in Shakur's slide, you have naked women. I'm like, they don't look naked to me. I mean, that's your problem if that's how you see it. I mean, they have clothes on. They just don't. You want to control women's bodies. There was a man I was talking to. So for you, that's unacceptable. So people that think like that, they didn't like the socialist government, so they wanted to overthrow it. And so, this type of mercenary mentality, they accepted help from the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency to train them and equip them to overthrow the socialist government in Afghanistan. And it's important to note that, because now today they want to make you believe that the U.S. is 100% opposed to the Taliban and is enemies of the Taliban. They're not enemies of the Taliban. They use the Taliban for their purposes when it serves their interests. And at the current time, when it doesn't, then now they have no use for the Taliban. They want to make you think that, the Taliban are a bunch of crazy Islamic fundamentalists and terrorists and supporters of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all of these people, and that's a problem. But the reality is that all of the skills that these people initiated during the war in Afghanistan, they learned them from training and equipment they got from your tax dollars, which fund activities carried out by the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, or as we call them, criminals in action. So you cannot, nobody in the US, and those of you that can see yourselves as Americans and support the US government, none of you can claim innocence in anything that ISIS is doing, that Al-Qaeda is doing, because you and what you support created these people, created what they're doing. You gave them capacity, training, equipment, the ability to do everything they're doing. That's where it came from. And, we only have an hour. I mean, we could do a whole broadcast on the Iran arms sales that were the arms that were given to these people to engage in war against the Afghani government. That's a whole different topic that your tax dollars paid for. So we don't want to hear any nonsense about, well, we stand for justice. We're not for fundamentalism of any kind. Of course, the US capitalism is for whatever needs to happen to uphold its interests. It doesn't care how many people are killed. It doesn't care what kind of terrorism is evoked around the world. As long as its interests are upheld, that's all it cares about. That is all it cares about. And in this instance, that meant supporting the overthrow of the Soviet Union so that they would no longer have this Cold War enemy in the Soviet Union. And then also, again, it would free up those territories for them to get that oil, those oil reserves, because, the US government is all it is a proxy for multinational corporations, and oil corporations are a large part of that. So this is the reason why every war this country fights, there's an economic reason behind it that benefits the multinational corporations. I know they tell you, well, they're fighting for freedom and democracy, and you got to be a fool to believe that in 2021. I mean, you really have to be a complete idiot if any party you believes any part of that. I mean, clearly, my father pulled my coattails to that when they drafted him to go over into Vietnam as one of the first people to go over there in the mid 60s. And when I was a little boy, he was telling me that he couldn't even live where he wanted to live in Louisiana, where he was from, go to school where he wanted to go in Louisiana, where he was from, work where he was qualified to work in Louisiana, where he was from, live where he had money to afford to live in Louisiana, where he's from. So his point was, why the hell would I go overseas and fight a people clear across the world and supposedly fighting for their freedom, and I don't even have it here for this government that won't even give it to me? So you have to be a fool to believe we're fighting for freedom. It has nothing to do, it's never had anything to do with that. It's about these big multinational corporations and their money and their control. So one more point on that is that if you see Michael Moore's film, Fahrenheit 9/11, I think it's called. I'm not a Michael Moore fan, but one thing he did well, and he has some good things in some of his movies, and one thing he did well is he showed you in the movie that Omar Mullah, the leader of the Taliban in the 90s, he and his delegation, they took a trip to Campbell, Texas, to visit with the Bush family. They were running for, preparing their presidential campaign. Bush Sr. had been president. They were preparing to run George W. to be president. And they wanted to resolve this issue in Afghanistan so they could have built this Caspian pipeline. And they left that meeting at the Bush's Campbell, Texas ranch. The Taliban left there, Omar Mullah left there, and I don't think there was any agreement made at that meeting. And I think the fact that they were not able to do that, because this was in the late 90s, like 97, 98, 99, somewhere in there. The fact they were unable to do that, that sealed the end for the Taliban right there. And I would argue created the conditions for 9/11 to happen. That's really what happened there. And I don't care what you think about how 9/11 happened, but one thing you cannot argue with is that 9/11 certainly served as a political objective that would develop the mass support in this country for the US to invade Afghanistan, to again, now move the Taliban out of the way because they were able to weaken the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union fell in the early 90s, right? So that was gone. So then after that happened, because their objective with the Soviet Union and Afghanistan was successful, they were able to overthrow the socialist government in Afghanistan. So that was great. So now all they had to do to get to those oil reserves was deal with the Taliban. So they did that. And 9/11 then served as the impetus for them to be able to go full force against the Taliban and get them out the way so they would have full access to build that Caspian oil pipeline. All right, so when we talk about Afghanistan and US imperialism, again, once the Soviets entered Afghanistan in 1979, the Carter administration began this campaign to lure the Soviet Unions deeper into that war, to the point where they were not able to sustain the war, which, as I just mentioned, that happened. That was able to carry out. And to accomplish that, the US had developed these relationships with these so-called mujahideen, all of these people, Osama bin Laden, all of these people. And, you should know, if you don't, that, Osama bin Laden was practically a billionaire. And the reason why is because his family, the Bin Laden family, owns Bin Laden International. And if you look up Bin Laden International, because people love to disagree and you have no basis of disagreement. You don't even know, like, do your homework. Like Shakur said, do your homework and then come back and talk to us, because one thing, we do our homework. We have a political education program in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And anyone that takes it seriously is gonna know about this stuff. And you can't half-ass it, you have to take it seriously. If you do that, you're gonna understand the stuff that we're talking about. We're not special people here talking about this stuff. We just learn the research skills to do the work. And so that's why we're always encouraging everybody to do that. Even though most people don't, most people just want to be entertained. You want somebody to spoon feed it to you. I was talking to this young European woman, and she was telling me that African people we have more access to scholarships today than European people, than white people. And she was convinced of this. And so I said to her, because I've learned a thing or two about debate over the years, organizing as a revolutionary in a backward capitalist society, you're bound to learn that. And so I said to her, so name these scholarships. What? Name the scholarship. Like, you're telling me that I have all this access to stuff you don't have, so you should be able to tell me what that is. I said, so what I want you to do is name the scholarships, and then when you name them, we have smartphones here, we can look them up. And when we look them up, I'll be able to show you that you're full of SHIT, you don't know what you're talking about, that's not true. She couldn't name a single one, of course, but still she was convinced of this. I'm like, well, how can you don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, you sound stupid. So yes, it's important to do this work, because if you do that, then you're able to understand or learn to understand, that in this case, these folks, Bin Laden International is the largest construction company on the planet Earth. Bin Laden International, and that's where Osama bin Laden got his resources from. In fact, after 9/11 happened, there were no planes in the air except for the planes that were carrying the bin Laden family out of the US to wherever they ended up taking them. Those are the only planes in the air over this country. So if you want to believe that Osama bin Laden is an enemy of the US, you go ahead and believe that. But that just doesn't jive with, actual facts and what happens here and what happened historically there. So they built these relationships with these folks. They trained people to help them fight this war in Afghanistan, to take over planes and use planes as bombs. You can use that. You can take that in one ear and out the other, do whatever with it you want. But that's a fact. That's in the CIA documents that they were forced to release. They trained people how to do this. And so they had people doing that. And it, of course, created this reality where, at that time, these people were telling the CIA, when we get through with the Soviets, we're coming for you. And I mean, to me, that's neither here nor there. I'm just saying that it's like when I was growing up in San Francisco, there was this guy that, used to have dog fights in the neighborhood where I grew up. And this dude that did that, he had these pit bulls, and he would, I'm letting you in on some ghetto tricks here. They would feed the pit bulls pencil shavings because it would for whatever reason, it would make them furious. They just litter their food bowl with pencil shavings, and they would eat it, and these dogs would be just vicious, and they would fight. So one time the dog, one of the dogs he had, bit him and one of his children. And even though I was young when that happened, like, to me, that was like, well, that's what Malcolm X talked about when he talked about the chickens coming home to roost. So my point here is that whatever you want to say about ISIS or Al Qaeda or whoever it is you think you're talking about, whatever they're doing, Boko Haram, Al Shabaab, whatever any of those people are doing, your tax dollars funded it. You need to lead with that. Your tax dollars funded their creation. Your tax dollars paid for their training and their development. And so that means whatever they're doing, you're partially responsible for that. That's what that means. So whatever you have to say about these people, you have to lead with those statements because they are absolutely irrefutable. And again, as I said, these folks we're talking about would go on to form the core of the elements of the people that they're trying to tell you today are the largest menace on the planet Earth. But, of course, as we've said, like, this was a case of the pit bulls gone wild and attacking the hand that fed them. And so this is what happened. And all of these documented CIA files talked about this, that the training that these people received and how they were trained to engage in the actions that they're calling terrorists today. And, we've got to break this misinformation wide open in the sense that you cannot say that the US is against terrorism. And I hope that no one listening to this believes that. But you cannot say the US is against terrorism. All you have to do is look at how the US has handled its interactions with Cuba, for example, over the last 60 years, to see that the US loves terrorism as long as it benefits their interests. Your tax dollars pay for US terrorist actions against Cuba. Not only the US economic blockade, the illegal and immoral US economic blockade against Cuba, but also the terrorist acts that were committed by organizations that were funded by the CIA, just like the people in Afghanistan. Groups like Alpha 66 and Omega 7, these people in Florida who have shot down planes, you all. They shot down a plane and killed 73 people from Cuba in the 70s. That's a terrorist act that was funded by your tax dollars. So you cannot say the US is against terrorism. I mean, you're just a naive idiot if you say that, if you make a statement like that. The US is a terrorist country. It's built on terrorism. Ask the indigenous people. It was founded on terrorism. Ask my ancestors. This is a terrorist nation. So they don't have any problem working with people that they'll work with people and then turn around and call them terrorists as long as their interests get represented, as long as what they want to see happens. That's all they care about. And so now you have this reality where they've trained and equipped these people, and they've created this reality where they're able to run the Soviets out. And then now they've decided to create this 9/11 event. And then now it's created support from everybody in this country for them to go over and overthrow the people that they trained and equipped to take over Afghanistan in the first place. Now you tell me what kind of sense that makes. So for the last 20 years, that's what they've been doing, allegedly, is trying to overthrow these people that they were the reason these people got in power in the first place. So if we fast forward to today, the Caspian oil pipeline that was engineered by Union Oil to get to those oil reserves in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, that has been built, it's constructing, it's operational as we speak. The Taliban was removed from power, and a US capitalist-friendly government had been installed there. And what you've seen in the last several weeks is now that the US is leaving, there's nobody to support that government that the US put in place to overthrow the Taliban. So the Taliban is coming back. And so that's why when people say, well, nothing was accomplished in Afghanistan, that's what they mean. That they've just basically gone in this circle. They trained these people and equipped them to take power by running the Soviets out. Then they organized and overthrew those people that they put in power, and they propped up a government to keep them out. And then now they've left, and now those people are coming back to take power again. So that's what people mean when they say nothing was accomplished. So, you know, again, the elimination of the socialist government in Afghanistan, what it did do for US imperialism is all of the US capitalist corporations that went into Afghanistan. There's an estimated 250,000 contractors in Afghanistan. So you ever think to ask the question, like, what are these people doing there? You know, why are they in Afghanistan? What are they doing there? They're making money there, you all, because this war created opportunities for them to make boatloads of money. And that's what was all about in the first place, was for them to go over there, run the Soviets out so they get to that oil and have the opportunity to make all of this oil. So you use Halliburton, for example. And if you recall, Dick Cheney, who was vice president under George W. Bush after 9/11, he served on the board of directors for Halliburton and Kellogg, Brown and Root. And this is a multinational corporation that has ties to the Kellogg family, which is one of the ruling class capitalist families. And so what Halliburton has done, they're all over the world. What they did is they went into Afghanistan, and they, after the Soviets were run out, and they charged for several years, about 15 years, they charged $20 a square foot to supposedly clean up the country. Now, if you do the research, the going rate for these services is about $2 US per square foot. They charged 10 times that much to maximize their profits. Raytheon, all of these US corporations went into Afghanistan and made record profits, profiting off of the exploitation of the Afghani people. And you all wonder why people aren't favorable to the US around the world. You know, when this kind of stuff is happening. Halliburton, they did the same thing. They've done the same thing in Haiti. They're doing it right now after the earthquake in Haiti. They do it all throughout Africa. They're down in the Gulf port after the Hurricane Ida, doing the same thing. They mopped up after Katrina in 2005 with the same type of criminal thug plan that they utilized in Afghanistan to make all this money. So again, multinational corporations run this government. This government is simply a proxy for their interests. So that's why they went in there, is to create the reality where all of this can happen. But they don't want to pay for it. So they use your tax dollars to pay for it. So that's important for people to understand, because people walk around saying stupid stuff like, well, if we have health care for all, how are we going to pay for it? Well, if you didn't spend so much money on this kind of nonsense, there will be plenty of money to pay for health care for everybody. There will be plenty of money to pay for houses for everybody. This is not a problem. It's not like this country doesn't have the resources to do that. There is not the political will. That's the problem. 50% of the budget of tax revenues in this country goes to the military. And when we say that, we're talking about to do this kind of nonsense. I don't know about you, but I don't want to pay money for that. I have no need for an intercontinental ballistic missile. I can tell you right now, there will never come a day in my life where I'll say, I really need to have an ICBM today. I wish I could get one of those. I will not have a need for that. I don't want to pay for a neutron bomb. I don't need that. But I have no problem paying for housing for people that don't have capacity to have it, or services for people who need it. That's where the money is. And that's why it's not available. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's because they need it to ensure that they can dominate and profit off of the suffering in the world. And so that temporary neutralization of the Taliban, again, it cleared the way for the creation of that oil pipeline, but it also opened up the country because, the pathways in Afghanistan during the 2000s, after the Taliban came to power, they were controlled by the Taliban. So the US, by eliminating the Taliban during that period, over the last 20 years, they cleared those pathways. They cleared the ways to those poppy fields. And now even your Federal Bureau of Investigation today in 2021 will tell you that 50% of the heroin existing in this country right now comes from Afghanistan, because it opened the way for the drug dealers to have free reign to transport those poppies here and have heroin to sell on US streets. So this is what your tax dollars accomplished in Afghanistan: the destabilization of a country, the unmitigated and shameful profiteering of multinational corporations, and the proliferation of the heroin trade coming out of Afghanistan. And I want to just point out that good brother Imhotep had made a comment that war costs $300 million per day for 20 years. That's absolutely right. For 20 years, that's how much money you're spending on these war efforts that do nothing to improve our lives. And I don't know if brother Imhotep remembers, but I remember right after 9/11, there was a panel discussion at the California State University Sacramento campus here. And there had to be 500 people there. And myself and brother Imhotep and another sister who unfortunately I can't remember, she was a student, I can't remember her name, and brother Imam Abdel Malik from Masjid al-Islam, we were speaking, and people were, this is 2001, right after 9/11, we were saying the same stuff we're saying now, and people were like aghast, like they were shocked. Because at that time, remember, the whole thing was this propaganda thing, like you gotta support US patriotism, and anybody speaking against that, that was just not happening on a wide scale. Of course we did it, because that's what we do. And we're not cowards, we're gonna do it no matter what. But most people were not doing that. And so, that's why that environment is what allowed all this to happen the way it happened. That's what allowed this to happen, because they were able to convince people that this country was on the right side of history. So now, 20 years later, hundreds of thousands, they keep talking about the 4,000 or 3,000 US troops that were killed in Afghanistan. I tell you, I don't give a damn about them. They shouldn't. If somebody comes in your house and you kill them, I'm not going to have sympathy for them. You wouldn't have sympathy for them either. I mean, that's insane. You might be sick in the head to believe like that, but I'm not. You go in somebody's country, they have a right to kill you, and they should kill you. It's their responsibility to do that. So I don't care anything about these people. I don't care if it's people I know. You shouldn't have gone over there. We've been trying to tell you not to do that for decades, since Vietnam. So if you did it, that's what happens. You break in somebody's house, they have a right to deal with you whatever way they feel appropriate. So we ain't shedding no tears for those people, but we are talking about the hundreds of thousands of Afghani people who have been murdered over the last 20 years because of US imperialism in that country. We are talking about that because they didn't have a choice. Everybody in the US military, mercenary military, has a choice. You decided to do that. I understand the economic conditions, but we got to be real about this. The only brave people during the Vietnam War are the people that refused to go. Even my father said that because he didn't know to do that. He told me the people that went to Canada and Mexico, those are the brave ones. And he was absolutely correct. He was absolutely correct. And so these people had no choice. They didn't ask for anybody to invade their country. They didn't ask for that. And now you got jet fuel and breast milk of Afghani women because of all the bombs that have been dropped. They didn't ask for any of that. So my empathies and sympathies go towards them. And if you know somebody in the US military, you should be talking to them and trying to convince them to get out so that they don't get involved in the next proxy war that these people create. And if you don't know how to talk to them about it, we're happy to help you with talking points. And you can direct them to us to talk to us. But we're not trying to talk to nobody that's, because a lot of these people are gung-ho. They love US imperialism. They believe in it. Okay, so you believe in it to your deathbed. And when you have your funeral, just like you laugh and dance on the deaths of these hundreds of thousands of Afghani people, don't be mad when people laugh and dance on your death. Because people are not going to sit around and just allow the US to run roughshod and exploit everybody in the world. Nobody should have to do that. Everybody has a right to stand up for justice and to live a life that allows them to reach their full potential. So just to summarize, we just want to say that whatever will happen in Afghanistan, it will happen as a result of what the Afghani people want to do. And what we would like to see happen is for them to have the opportunity to do that without being influenced by imperialism to do that. They have the right and the agency to make the decision for what's best in their country. That may be an Islamic government. We don't know. That may be another effort at building socialism there. We don't know. That's what I would like because that's what I believe in. But that's up to them to decide. They have a right to decide that. And we have faith in them that they will be able to do that. And we are just, it's just unfortunate that over the last several decades, they have been the only country that's been occupied by the Soviet Union and the US. They're the only country where that it happens, to my knowledge. And so now they've had to, you know, they're bearing the brunt of that. And then now, you know, the Taliban is back and they got to deal with whatever that brings. But we should not be confused into thinking, following this propaganda here, that all of a sudden wants to make you believe that they're concerned about the plight of women in Afghanistan. They don't care about the plight of women in Afghanistan. If they did, they wouldn't have organized an overthrow of the socialist government in Afghanistan in the 70s, because that was a period of great progress for women in Afghanistan. So clearly they're not concerned about that. They're concerned about one thing, their ability to profit off of people's suffering. That's all they're concerned about. And so if you think that's wrong, then you have a responsibility to embrace truth around this and stop telling these right-wing and liberal lies about, well, we have to go there because we have to protect the women in Afghanistan. That's not what's happening. You all stop lying. Stop perpetuating these people's lies and start telling the truth. US imperialism invaded Afghanistan to exploit its political and economic interests. And they have no business there, and they should be run out of the country. And the people of Afghanistan can decide for themselves what kind of country they want going forward. That's the truth. That's the objective truth. And so we want to tell you that this type of analysis, you can develop it. I mean, we're glad you come here to get it. We appreciate you coming, but we ask you to help us expand this, because the reason why so many of these lies hold so much weight is that there aren't enough of us telling the truth. We have to create a culture and environment where truth becomes dominant. That is not the case right now, not by a long shot. So one way that can help is make sure you let people know about these programs and invite them to come and participate. And if you don't want to do that, then organize your own program where you can tell truth. Do that. But we have to do more to get the truth out there. We don't have enough of that happening. And what few elements there are out here, we're not supporting them the way we need to. You know, what people do is, like, some people will come, and we appreciate that, but you just come, you listen, get it in your head, and then after this, you have dinner, eat a heavy dinner, and then you're dozing off in front of the TV. And then by the time you wake up tomorrow morning, you done forgot everything that we talked about, so it doesn't go anywhere. So we got to build a better model than that. We need your help in doing that. So make sure you should constantly be telling people. Don't just tell one person and never follow up with them, and they don't participate. And then you, well, I did what he said. I told somebody. No, we have to continue to do this. The CIA, they don't rest. They don't just say, well, we went into Afghanistan and did that. Since they went into Afghanistan, they've gone into Venezuela, sabotage. Bolivia, sabotage. They go into Florida against Cuba, sabotage. They go into the Congo, sabotage. They go into Zimbabwe, sabotage. They never rest. So we can't rest. We got to be willing to stand up and fight constantly. And all we're talking about is you just telling people. You ain't even got to do nothing right now, because most people ain't ready to do nothing. But you can tell people, you can do that. So please, we beg of you, let people know about these events I'm about to tell you about. It's critically important. So our Ancestors' Voices, this program, it's next Sunday, September 12th, 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to remember the Libyan Jamahiriya and imperialism sabotage against it. Similar to Afghanistan, Libya was a shining light in Africa. Muammar Gaddafi, I would argue, from talking to people all throughout Africa when I'm there, was the most popular person in Africa. Most of you would say Nelson Mandela, but that was not true. Even Nelson Mandela admired Muammar Gaddafi because of the work Libya did to uplift Africa. And this was sabotaged by your liberal, democratic, Negro president, Barack Obama. So yes, I choose the Arab man, Muammar Gaddafi, over the so-called African man, Barack Obama. I didn't vote for him. So I don't have any, I don't have to take responsibility for that. You all that voted for him, you got to take responsibility. You put him there to do that. And whoever you voted for would have done it anyway. But that's why we don't participate in that. And you want to criticize us for participating in that? This is what we'll talk about next week. These people literally sabotaged the shining light on the African continent. And he was the one in charge when it happened. So let's talk about that. I don't want to talk about how good he looks with his wife. I don't care about that. I want to talk about the millions of people, African people, who have suffered because of his upholding the interests of capitalism and white supremacy. Let's talk about that when we talk about Obama, because anything else about Obama is completely irrelevant. So join us next week if you can handle it when we talk about that. And then you should go to AAPRP-intl.org. Join the APRP. Many people are continuing to do that. We appreciate it. You can watch a short video there. That's a wonderful thing. And go to abetterworld.me. These videos are housed there if you want to go back and look at them. And you should donate while you're there. We do this work. We need help doing it, so we appreciate that. We have a fundraiser for our comrades. We're having a big meeting in Africa next year, and we're organizing a fundraiser for comrades that need a little financial assistance. So I'll have that on the screen next week. I forgot to do it for today, but we'll have that there. Hopefully you can donate there. It's not for me. I'm buying my own ticket to go home out of my pocket to Africa, but some of our people won't be able to do that. So we're raising money for them. So you should support. It's a good thing to do that. And I'm an editor for hoodcommunist.org. on the editorial team, and we have bi-monthly Telegram events. They kicked us off of Twitter, so we do it on Telegram. So you can download Telegram on your smartphone free of charge and participate with us Thursday at 4:30 Pacific time, 7:30 Eastern time, every other Thursday. This week is the week. We'll have a topic that we'll announce soon. And we had a wonderful discussion 2 weeks ago on Afghanistan, and then 2 weeks before that on Black August, George Jackson, Huey P. Newton, et cetera, and so forth. So we'll have another interesting topic this week, and you can participate in that discussion. So we invite you to tell people about these events. Please don't say, well, I don't know what that Telegram is, so I ain't even gonna tell nobody about it. Don't be selfish like that. Help us do the work. Please, we need your help. And the APRP has a number of broadcasts we do. The APRP Pantula podcast, our comrades on the East Coast of this plantation, every Monday do that. Revolutionary African Women, Raw, last Saturday of the month. Forward Ever podcast on Spotify radio. Our comrades in New Mexico, APRP weekly news broadcast, 12 noon Mountain Time every Thursday. So check all of those out. We told you what we're doing next week here on our Ancestors' Voices. And we encourage you to continue to get in groups and buy my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. I have groups that I'm working with in different parts of the country based on the concepts in the group to organize independent communities, to empower these communities in a revolutionary, independent organizing sense. So we need more of this. We want you to reach out. You can get more information on that at abetterworld.me. So we really ask you to do that. This work is critically important. We're honored to do it. We're standing in the footsteps of our ancestors. We ask you to help us whatever way you can. It's much appreciated. Appreciate you all. We hope you have a great rest of your Sunday evening. Forward ever, backwards never. We're marching forward to one unified socialist Africa, not capitalist, socialist Africa. That's right. Let's say it one more time. Socialist Africa. That's what we want. We're not afraid to say it. We'll never be afraid to say it. And more importantly, we're not afraid to work for it. That's what we're doing. Because we know that white supremacy has got to go. We know patriarchy is evil. It's got to go. We know homophobia is evil. It's got to go. And y'all already know the daddy of them all, capitalism, got to go. Have a great rest of your Sunday evening. Forward ever, backwards never.